What's up, guys? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of our videos. Also, make sure you follow us all over social media so you don't miss any of our content or show announcements. So obviously, as we know, the Sixers are off to a completely disastrous start, and it extends beyond the health. They haven't looked good even when their stars have been available, although all three of them have not suited up this year. And I've been somewhat, patient with them, because anytime you do a 3-star build, you need to have all three of your stars available, because a 3-star build is so expensive, especially when you do it through free agency, the way they did with with Paul George. When you do it through free agency, one of the things that happens is you end up having to only shop in like the discounted deal market for the rest of your roster. And there's not a single player on the team that makes over 10 million other than the 3 stars, right? So there's a lot of flawed guys, right? Like athletes like Kelly Oubre and Caleb Martin, who are athletic and can do a lot of stuff on defense, but they're inconsistent on the offensive end of the floor. Or maybe some guys that can score the ball, but they have some big gaping holes on the defensive end of the floor, right? Like there's a lot of like the Guerschon Yabusele type of thing, right? Or like you're going to get an older guy like Kyle Lowry. It's a little bit past his prime. You're going to get a lot of like limited players outside of your 3-star build. That said, even if you just watch the Sixers, they generally don't look like a super competent team. There are lots of teams around the league that have had bad health luck in various ways to start the season, and yet they win through infrastructure because there is a culture that is established from the top down that permeates through the roster, and it leads to everybody playing above what they're typically capable of, and it leads to a certain floor that's going to get you more than 2 wins, especially in an Eastern Conference where you're playing a schedule with a lot of favorable matchups. I'm pulling it up right now, but I would venture to guess the majority of the games that Philly has played this year against teams that are below 500. And it is. They have played 6 games against teams that are below 500, and they're 2-4 in those matchups. Like that's, if you're a competent organization, you should at least have a certain floor that can hover around 500 or better against the limited teams in the league when you're down your stars. And this is where I have a problem with the situation with Joel Embiid. And so for the people that have not read the article out there, last night the Sixers had a big team meeting. Apparently Tyrese Maxey in particular called out Joel Embiid for being late, quote unquote, for everything, and how it impacts the locker room from other players to the coaching staff. Sources briefed on the meeting told ESPN. This was the article that Shams Charania released this morning. It goes further in the article to talk about how the players want to be coached harder, but then the coaches were critical of the players for not practicing with enough purpose and attention to detail. And so basically it looks to me like they're not behaving like a serious basketball team. If you're not practicing hard, if you're not practicing with purpose and attention to detail, if your star is showing up late, quote unquote, for everything, that tells me there's a cultural problem from the top down. And so, first of all, I think I want to really focus in on Joel Embiid here for a second, because I've seen like different versions of this around the league in varying capacities. And it's like, it's one of those things where early in the season, you know who else had some really bad health luck? The Denver Nuggets. And they just, Nikola Jokic just went to his basically went to his sliders and just turned everything up to compensate for the guys that were out of the lineup. And his approach was, I have to do as much as possible to carry this team until my guys get it together, and then maybe we can go on a more serious run later. It is a cultural thing from the top down that is established throughout the organization. I look at Golden State, and there's even a stretch where Steph Curry was gone for a part of the year with that ankle injury. And they rip off wins. They rip off wins because there is a culture that is established from the top down that permeates through the roster. There's a style of play. There's a commitment to excellence throughout the organization. And I think way too often when we're evaluating basketball teams, we don't factor in that element of leadership from your best player. If your best player views himself as above the rules, if your best player is skimping on the work, if your best player comes into camp way out of shape and completely unready to play, if your best player isn't committed to the work, it gets that much harder for you as an organization to establish that culture all the way down the roster. And here's where I have a big problem with it. Joel Embiid's mad. He's mad that his team hasn't been very good. He was openly politicking this summer, took Paul George to a playoff broadcast and sat on a studio desk and flirted and hinted at the idea that they were going to be together. You heavily pressured your front office to put themselves out there and overpay for an aging Paul George so that you could have this 3-star build with Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Joel Embiid and potentially make a title run. If you're going to do that, fine. I understand that as a competitor. You want firepower. You want to give it a shot. You see the talent around the league. You see Boston. You see what the Knicks are doing. You see what the Bucks did going to get Dame. You look at how talented Oklahoma City is and all these teams out in the Western Conference, there's all that depth of talent. And you look at it and you go, we need firepower. I get that. I have no problem with that. I even said this summer, if you're Philly, you have to do it. You have to do it because there's urgency with Joel Embiid. And free agency was your best pathway to improve the roster. Paul George was the best guy available. You did what you had to do. The Sixers held up their end of the bargain. Your end of the bargain now, Joel Embiid, is you have to be Jokic. You have to be Luke. You have to behave like the best players at the league, at the top of the league, which means you have to show up at the start of training camp ready to fucking go. You have to get your body right so that when the season starts, you can lead your team out the gates, establish culture, establish that attention to detail and that pursuit of excellence, show up on time for everything, lead by example, hold your damn teammates accountable, make sure they're meeting you at that level. If you are able to do that, then your team can establish culture. Then you can establish that attention to detail and pursuit of excellence. Then you can raise your floor to the point where, oh, my knee's a little bulky. I have to miss a couple of games. It's okay. We're in the Eastern Conference. We're going to win these games. It is possible to establish a higher floor than the Sixers have demonstrated this year, even with the roster limitations that they have beyond their 3-star build. But it has to start from the top. I ranked Joel Embiid 11th in my player rankings among the superstar tier this year. There was 11 players I viewed in the tier. It was Jokic, Luka, Giannis, Shea. I think it was Ant, AD, Tatum, LeBron, KD, Steph, and Embiid. I ranked Embiid 11th because I said he doesn't attack the regular season from start to finish, so you can't rely on him to just be out there and available and ready to go at all times, okay? And then 2, his game has a certain limitation when it gets to the postseason, right? And then 3, he's kind of somewhat difficult to build around in the sense that he's kind of shoehorns you into specific styles of play on both ends of the floor. Now, all of a sudden, your roster build kind of has to cater to his style of play. But the big one there at the beginning is, how do you establish from start to finish in a regular season a championship culture if your star is going to, on one hand, go out and openly politic for you to go all in as a front office on this season and then come out the gates this season bullshitting? Like it's embarrassing for Joel Embiid. It's a classic example of what separates him from the guys that are actually at the top of the league that have anchored themselves there and have had the success that he's been unable to achieve. And quite frankly, it's juvenile. It's juvenile behavior to, as a professional who openly communicates about how he has a goal of winning a championship and being renowned as the best player in the league, then go behave like the best player in the league. The best players in the league aren't acting this way. The best players in the league aren't having to be called out and held accountable by their co-star for not showing up to damn meetings on time. It's embarrassing, man. And like, I just can't get over the fact that he politicked the way he did this summer for the front office to go all in. And then he came in this season and he's not going all in. It's mind-blowing to me. But like, here we are. It's not even Thanksgiving, and we're getting heavily reported tell-all pieces about all the shit that's going on behind the scenes because you can't behave like a professional. It's just, quite frankly, I'm not interested in hearing Joel Embiid's name among the top players in the league until he starts acting like one of the top players in the league. It's not something I'm interested in.